For our first flag, I'm going to encourage sports fans because this is National Geographic interest. I just found an interesting fact today. The name Redskin was derived by Canadians who essentially, I guess it wasn't technically at the time, but up that way in Canada. So the people who eventually became descendants, which now are. Anyways, they used to paint themselves red, and so it led them to call them red men. I'm not sure if this is some sort of rebuttal or anything, but last time I watched Native American representation on PBS, it displayed a common thread and description and intent. And it was this beaded thing, and it showed a big heart and a small heart. And it proved the tribal culture was making a significant symbol to transmit a communication that the American, aka at this point to them, as they displayed it on PBS still today, white man has a very small heart. We have very big heart. So obviously when people are coming onto your territory and taking way larger numbers and yada yada, and making the balance of, well, shit used to be fair, at least with the tribal situation. But ultimately, you can see where there was a common reasoning in a man who saw a man who painted himself red and a man who saw a color on his natural complexion, and how he chose to talk about him on PBS in modern day, as no one would ever attach Redskin to something negative. If you were caught saying those Redskins are Indian givers, how ironic is the paradox of registering what is and isn't racist, evaluating what is slander. It's a negative connotation. So if it's purely descriptive from its birth, and our entire government is based off of these tribal red men's lesson to us, by the way, we've been living by for hundreds of years now, and is kind of going to be self-defeating if we are still, perceived as this, I guess. And it just makes me wonder, this symbol, this flag, this thing, what does the marketing symbol of a team, what is the core of it? It's a prideful thing. A lot of people see cowboys as reckless, dangerous people. People did that, and we've got a lot of plays on culture and how one discerns what is a deliberate term for an accusation which could hurt, not to mention blacklist an individual or a people or a franchise. It's rather interesting, but at the end of the day, there is no right opinion. There's just things that happened. I mean, maybe when they started calling them red men, they did have negative connotations, and it was this descriptive thing which helped identify things, was mostly helped to identify a separation in why we should be separate and scared, but it was really at the beginning just a term. And clearly in the Redskins franchise, the name was cultivated under the most basic rudimentary variable of visual commonplace. So I wonder if, just like why white boy with small heart, not just the invaders, becomes a dialogue which is free to use on public television still today. You find ultimately a implication as to where and how there's a duality to where negative energy cultivates a false term, a false association, and recognize where there's far more terms we can understand, not syntactically, where this is evident. So you have to think deeper about where and how we can eliminate racism by not choosing to take things in a manner which leaves us a lack of the common strengths it was presented for. So if somebody's talking about the cons instead of the pros, at the end of the day, the marketing structure changes based on public opinion, which alters based on their social situation. Now, why did the German flag, something similar, once reign over Russia? Russia was well integrated in Russia after in Europe, which became Russia for about 100 years. Except for England, obviously. They couldn't deal with the island situation. But, now it is the latitude, red, white, and blue basic flag, similar to France. Similar, whatever. Anyways, how these political streams of duality unwind and rewind in different hemispheres, there's a premise to how these flag views are just the same as skin views. So how we transpire between how racial terms become a color within a flag and a symbol in a way to understand where this ideological premise exists, we can begin to rudimentarily validate strengths, not weaknesses. You could assess the Russian flag or the American flag in negative terms, but the red, white, and blue have dual positive polarity in terms of how we describe blue, red, and white, and make them the strength of the flag, even though when Russia had a German-like flag, it had something to do with the royalty thing. But it still had a representation that was reproduced, or they reproduced it, or somehow negative and positive connotations got wrapped up in simple dialogue and syntax, which can come through symbols or words. But at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want that, and it's their culture, and they can prove most of them don't, really shouldn't argue that. Whatever. Anyways, how can we go over branding before we get into the first international flag? Oh, I'm sorry, maybe the 6-point star of Walmart, and then we'll get into the communist Chinese flag.